What's up, college football fans? Sonoy Valente here once again with the Mean Green Show, and today I'm joined by two GOATs in the media or non-media industry, however you want to cut it, with Stephen Hamner and Eric Henry. And guys, where can we find you at?
And well, thanks for having us, Sonoy. I'll just jump in front of Eric real quick so I can get my words in first. But you can just find us at QB Spotlight, YouTube, podcast, Twitter, and we just kind of bounce around and are here for any quarterback-related content.
Appreciate Steve jumping in ahead of me there, but no, you can find me on Twitter at @EricCHenry_. Can find my FIU coverage at UnderdogDynasty.com and on Twitter at UnderdogDynasty. And if you want to go and check out the Conference USA podcast, can find that at Underdog Dynasty as well. Last but not least, Shula Bowl podcast at Shula Bowl Pod on Twitter, at Shula Bowl Pod, 5reasonsports.com.
Awesome. And guys, you already know the drill. If you're a fan of college football recruiting, G5 football, transfer portal, any or all of the above, consider hitting that like and subscribe button because that is all that we talk about. All right, guys. Well, before we get into God's conference and Conference USA, Eric, I wanted to, one, thank you for coming on, and two, let you know you are the first verified guest on my show. So really, I just, sincerely thank you for coming down and meandering with the common folks, with Stephen and I. So, it's a big blessing to have you.
For a litany of reasons.
Yes, for a litany of reasons. Hey, you got verified. You started spitting off all this literature at me, before we started the show of litany. Why don't you tell everybody what litany means? Because we got some graduates that may not know what that is either.
Listen, Snowy, first off, I am not worthy of that intro. I don't know what to make of that intro. I'm just a regular guy like everybody else out here in these
humble and hungry. I love it.
College football space. And for those of you listening and or watching, it's kind of an inside joke that was carried over from pre-tape now to taping. I used the word litany. I said litany of reasons, and I guess that is indicative of my stuffy journalistic nature. There, the word litany is just it's a lot. It's a ton. Many of reasons. So there you go. For anyone who may not know, that now makes me sound even more pretentious than maybe I did to start the segment. But so no, you could take it away from there, sir. It is your show.
All right,
litany. I'm just on this train. Wherever it goes.
Litany, meaning of reasons. Next episode, we'll go into indicative or whatever you said. Well, all right. So teeing off with the east side of the conference with Marshall. Marshall's coming off a 7-3 season last season, and Grant Wells being their QB. Do you think he's getting a little bit too much criticism as it pertains to? I just feel like everyone's kind of been hard on him but he's coming off of a freshman year that was pretty successful. And if you take away that Rice game where I think what did he have, like 4 or 5 picks during that Rice game?
Right.
Subtract that one horrible game that he had. I mean, again, he had a lights out freshman year and winning the conference. I mean, so what are your guys' takes on Marshall and Grant Wells specifically, as far as, do you think he's getting too much criticism, being that he's coming off a freshman year? And what are your thoughts on him next year? And whoever wants to take the floor first, go ahead.
Steve, why don't you go ahead and we probably should have prepped this pre-show, but why don't you
probably should have for a litany of reasons.
This guy, well, just better lead off each time and I'll follow.
Okay, that sounds good. And so for anyone that's followed like the QB Spotlight podcast, this is a topic me and Eric have touched on several times throughout the year. I think if you distribute the games at his rough ending, if they were like kind of spread out through the season, he probably wouldn't have had as much or getting as much criticism as he's getting now, if you will. Me personally, haven't seen any of that criticism. But I think he's going to have, to answer the last question, I think he's going to have a good sophomore season. I think he did a lot of good things during his freshman season. And I think it's like that snowball effect, right? When you have one bad play, it leads to another bad play, then it leads to bad games. So I think that's what kind of happened at the end of the season. But I'm a big Grant Wells fan. I think he's got talent, and I think he'll take that next step and will learn to eliminate the bad plays, not leading to more bad plays. I think that was the biggest thing. Bad plays will happen, but can you adjust and kind of grow? And so I think we'll see a better job of that next year in 2021, or I guess in about a month when it gets up and going. So.
Sonoy, I understand what you're saying in terms of, I think you said it was one bad game. I would say it was the final 3 games down the stretch. The Rice game was most notable, right? I mean, Rice just came in like a buzzsaw. They had a great defensive plan. And that's been a great defensive team. Or I shouldn't say great, but it's been a very solid defensive team really since the start of Mike Bloomgren's tenure, despite their offensive struggle. So, certain things have happened. But With Wells, I do think it's a fair criticism that when you open the year, I believe it was Eastern Kentucky, they opened the year against, if memory serves me correct, and you have the 5-touchdown game and you look like, you're a Heisman candidate and things of that nature. The schedule just got tougher, right? And that's kind of expected out of a young quarterback. So I think he'll rise to the occasion. But I do think it is fair to maybe question is a little bit strong, but I do think it's fair to, kind of wonder how he'll rebound, especially coming in with a new offense. It's one of the things that in terms of the development of a young quarterback, you want to try to keep some continuity there. And I think Charles Huff will be able to do that. When you look at the pieces that are in place as far as the coaching staff from last year and the pieces that have carried over to this year. So I think it's a fair criticism to kind of question or maybe wonder how he'll rebound from that 3-game stretch. And for, it's been a hot topic amongst Conference USA fans is really what Grant Wells will we see, right? Is he the guy who was the first 5 or 6 games against teams that weren't particularly that good? Outside of FAU, and even that game had a pedestrian game, or is he going to be more of the guy who, when you got into conference play, really kind of struggled?
Yeah. Do you guys think there's any type of competition there or not really? Like, you think anyone's going to push him? No. Yeah. Okay. I didn't really think so either. What are your thoughts on, real quick, Eric, what are your thoughts on them, going to a new coach coming off of a pretty successful season? You know what I mean? I mean, do you think that was the right move? And why did you have any insight as to why they may have done that?
We'll be here for a long time if I'm going to sit here and try to explain to you the long history of Doc Holliday and Marshall. I mean, you can even go back to was 5, 6, 7 years ago when it was rumored that the governor of West Virginia actually wanted Doc Holliday replaced. That just goes to show you there's been that kind of a strenuous relationship. Here's the fact of the matter. Marshall fans, at least seemingly from the ones I've heard from, believe that the team is underachieved. And you can make that argument when you look at the talent they've had, over the past better part of a decade. And for FAU to come in and have more conference titles than they have. And there was almost a point a couple years ago where like FIU had eclipsed them. Now, of course, that isn't the case now, but Marshall fans are right in saying that, hey, maybe we've underachieved a bit. And I think that is part of the reason why that decision was made. I mean, once you started getting to listen, no coach wants to go into the final year of his deal without some sort of assurance, that he's going to get extended, right? And once a Doc Holliday, a guy who had been successful, more or less, throughout his tenure wasn't extended, you kind of saw the writing on the wall. But as far as the new coach, Charles Huff, we had a chance to talk to him on the Conference USA podcast, comes from the Nick Saban coaching tree, spent some time in the NFL as well. So obviously has great, has been under great mentors and great coaches there and is considered one of the top recruiters in all of college football. And I think when I mentioned as far as the continuity between the old coaching staff and the new, they kept offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey. And I think that was key because when developing a young quarterback, as I mentioned, you don't want to just start throwing. You don't want to have a Jack Abraham example, to use the CUSA reference, right? Where you just have 5, 6, 7. I think in his time at Southern Miss, he had 4 or 5 offensive coordinators. So you don't want that to happen. So I think Wells will rebound and kind of progress this year. But yeah, as far as the Doc Holliday situation, that you can say it was a good year, and it was a good year if you're a UNT fan or an FIU fan or whoever. But Marshall, I mean, rightfully so, they've come to expect. The teams they've fielded, why can't we win the division and win the conference?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, moving things over to FAU. FAU coming off a 5-4 season, which, FAU has kind of become, accustomed to having, more success in that. So it's kind of a down year for them. Who's the guy there? We have N'Kosi Perry coming in from Miami. Obviously, he did a lot of good things at Miami at times. We also have Michael Johnson Jr. and Nick Tronti, who both started a few games last year, if I'm correct. And then I don't know if he'll make any type of push this season or down the road, but we have, Coach Taggart's son also there. Okay, Steven, so who do you think is the guy coming into this year?
Yeah, so real quick, Nick Tronti was the main starter last year, and Michael Johnson transferred from Penn State. Correct, Eric? He was a Penn State transfer this past year?
Correct.
So he was okay. I got you.
Yes, it was Posey, J. Right. Posey that was starred the other games for FAU. But yeah, so I do think, and Eric will have more insight as far as who's probably the guy moving forward, but I do think it's probably N'Kosi Perry for the simple fact you kind of have seen and what the other quarterbacks have to offer, at least Nick Tronti. Michael Johnson, the word's kind of still out. Devion Posey, he's a good dynamic athlete. And then, of course, you have Taggart's son who is in there as well. But I think what you're getting from Tronti already. It was exposed last year. And I think you also know what N'Kosi Perry is bringing in. And he can fit that offense pretty well. What they were lacking last year was the ability to push the ball downfield field to really open up what Taggart wants to do with his offensive scheme. And so if you can't push the ball downfield, then you have a shortened field. And so I think Perry, at the very least, even if the completion percentage isn't as high as they want to be, I think he has that threat and ability, and that can open up more things, especially at the CUSA level. If you just have the threat of pushing the ball downfield and complete those passes, and I think you have some more success. So I think Perry's the guy for that reason. You know what you're getting from other guys, and he's going to open the field a bit more so Taggart can actually utilize the offense how he wants it to be done. But as far as like the other insight stuff, Eric's probably going to have a better take than I have on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, when talking about FAU, and you mentioned kind of an average year there, you got to look at the circumstances in totality. That was a really young team, especially defensively. They lost their quarterback, who was a top offensive player of the year candidate, and Chris Robinson, during the summer, and, he had his struggles. So you insert a guy, Nick Tronti, who has to take over. And Nick Tronti is not the passer that Chris Robinson is. Steve can tell you this. Chris Robinson, former 4-star recruit, began his career at Oklahoma. So when you talk about those kind of passing credentials versus a Nick Tronti, a guy who's kind of I use this example only because they're from the same area there in that Nice, Ponte Vedra Beach area of Florida. It's kind of a poor man's Tim Tebow, in terms of the college level. He's going to throw a little bit. He's going to run a little bit. He's kind of a scrappy kind of quarterback. So you have to expect a little bit of drop off there. And then defensively, what was really surprising, and you have to be optimistic about this if you're an FAU fan, is that was a young defense. They lost Achilles Leroy, again, a defensive player of the year candidate to academic issues. He's now back this year, but they still managed to excel. Guys like Chase Lassiter, Evan Anderson, Jalen Joyner, Zion Gilbert, Amon Ross, the list goes on. They have, it's funny, this is another conversation amongst CUSA circles. They may not have that all-star Sonoy, like D'Angelo Malone, for example, at Western Kentucky, or, like a Blaze Aldridge, for example, at Western, or, to your favorite, Dion Noville at North Texas. But they've got a sum of all parts. They have 11 really good defensive players. So that's something that from last year you can take as a positive, even though they went 5-5 or 5-4, if memory serves me correctly. No, 5-5.
5-4. 5-4.
5-4. Okay, yeah. So even though they kind of had a pedestrian year and they lost their final few games down the stretch, especially that game to Southern Miss, one that Southern Miss kind of rose to the occasion that year. I'm high on FAU this year. I think they're really going to challenge in the East.
Okay, so also with N'Kosi Perry, I think he's getting some NIL deals. Yeah, right? Yeah, NIL deals already. Do you guys know anything about that? Eric, do you? I mean, I know you're kind of down there, keeping your ear to the ground. I'm not on that. I'm
not gonna lie. Shane Marinelli for Owls 247 Sports. Now I can shout out Shane since he is running the 247 side for FAU. Congrats to him. He mentioned that N'Kosi has a couple deals, and I cannot recall off the top of my head, but he does have a few deals down there, and that's kind of expected. I mean, even if you go to FIU, some of the kids down the road, they've got local deals. So I mean, it's South Florida. You're going to have opportunities.
Absolutely. Do you know, what the fans are feeling towards Coach Taggart as of now? Coming off of those high years with Coach Kiffin, and then having their 5-4 year. Are they still real high on Coach Taggart? A, and then B, do you know what maybe the fans are expecting this year out of FAU?
I'm going to take that in reverse. The expectations are a division title. I can tell you that right now, and again, with good reason. I mean, especially with N'Kosi. For whatever N'Kosi was or wasn't, whatever you want to make of him at transition to Conference USA, he's got all the physical tools and seemingly the pieces around him, on offense. In terms of how they're feeling about Coach Taggart, and again, I can't claim to be as plugged in onto FAU as I am FIU, but I can say this. There has been a feeling with some of the fan base coming off of Lane Kiffin. Not only is Lane a big personality, but they were putting points on the scoreboard. When you're winning games 42, 24, 45, 30, and listen, they had good defense. Maybe the 30 or 24 is a little high, but you get the point, right? They were scoring points. That's an appealing brand of football, and you're also winning. With Willie Taggart, I think, and this is just kind of the feeling I've got and kind of my own feeling as well, he's looking to play a little bit more of a, I don't want to say ground and pound, but more of a traditional. He's not looking to run the spread as much. He's looking to get some more pro-style concepts with Michael Johnson Sr. Coming in from Penn State as well. Michael Johnson Sr. come from Oregon or Penn State?
Penn State.
Penn State. Okay, all right. Just I know he was at Oregon prior because that was a connection. But anyhow, when you're running a more traditional style of offense, you better win, right? Because I can tell you this as a UCF grad in the George O'Leary days. it ain't exactly an appealing brand of football when you're winning games 17-10. Like UCF won a ton of games when I was there as a student, and they weren't selling out the stadium. As soon as, Scott Frost got there and their Mackenzie Milton's flipping in the end zone and they're winning games 50-25, that packs the house. And that's kind of the feeling with FAU. So it's going to be crucial that they get off to a good start this year, because just the brand of football they're looking to shift away from Lane Kiffin, that may alienate the fan base a little bit.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Moving things over to Western Kentucky, one of the more interesting QB rooms for a litany of reasons. What are your guys' thoughts on Bailey Zapp or Bailey Zappi? I'm not sure how to, pronounce his name exactly, but, grad transfer out of Houston Baptist FCS school, and I can reiterate these questions if you guys forget, but I want to ask, so last year, obviously the FCS played in the spring, so HBU only played FBS schools, and I don't have his stats in front of me. Steven, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but moral of the story is he tore it up, against FBS schools with FCS talent. So, he did really well. First question is for both of you guys is, are you more of a fan of the Nkosi Perrys, the James Fosters, the Jace Rooters of the conference that are coming down from the Power 5 level, that didn't have the success that they wanted, at the Power 5 level? Or are you guys more of a fan of the Bailey Zappi route of going to the FCS, kind of dominating, and then coming up a level? That's kind of the first question. Again, I can come back, Eric, if you forget by the time you're on. The second question is, do you guys think this was a good move by Bailey Zappi, from the standpoint of what is, he only has 1 year left, so what is he really looking to accomplish in this 1 year with this coming off a 5-7 Kentucky team? Is this like, are they trying to win 8 games, and is he trying to get drafted off of his the resume that he can put out this year? And do you think he's maybe rolling the dice a little bit? Because what if it goes the other way? This is his first. There's no guarantee that they're going to have a winning record. There's no guarantee they're going to win 5 games. There's no guarantees in football, obviously, for a litany of reasons. But do you think that this was a good move? And if he elected to initially or essentially not do this, if he were to just attempt the NFL after this year of the FCS, would he have gotten drafted? Probably not. But would he have got picked up for a camp? It's very possible, I think. But what do you think, I guess, the goal is for him? Do you think this is a goal, like, I'm trying to go here and get drafted off of 1 year? And do you guys like the move? I know that was a lot of questions, so I can reiterate that at any points. But Steven, if you'll tee off on that.
So yeah, definitely lots of different parts to the question. So I think let's go ahead and just jump with let's go with the first topic where you talked about, do you like quarterbacks dropping down a level or going up a level more? Let's kind of knock that out real quick, and then have just like a Bailey Zappi kind of part of it. So I think with the first question, I'll have Eric piggyback off this. I think it just depends. There's no formula. We've seen success and failures with both. For example, we've seen Jeff Driscoll come down from Florida, have a great success at La Tech, and he was just an average to mediocre player in the SEC. Lost success at La Tech, ends up getting drafted. And then we've seen guys drop down like Pigram from Maryland, comes down to Western Kentucky last year. Not a ton of success. Now he's transferring again. So I think it's it just really depends on the player. I don't think I don't have a favorite route to begin with. I, of course, love seeing the guys go from the FCS level to a higher level and have success. Maybe that's a bit tougher at the quarterback position, but at the same time, I don't think there's an exact formula, and I don't have a favorite. It's kind of just hit or miss with any quarterback evaluation, but I don't think anything changes if you're going from higher to lower or lower to higher level. Eric, I don't know if you have anything different you want to jump on that before we kind of dive into Zappi talks. We'll have some good stuff with Zappi.
Steve, I'm gonna let you go down into Zappi talk. I can, because listen, I all I'll really add, is this. I know you asked a litany of questions, so I'm just gonna kind of take in this direction and then let Steve come back to his analysis. This is what I like about the move. I think Bailey Zappi is the real deal. He threw for over 1,800 yards last year, or something like 17 touchdowns, 5 or 4 interceptions. And he's shown, at least against Conference USA level talent. And that's why I think this move is so brilliant, because it's not like he's saying, I'm going to go play in the SEC, right? Mm-hmm. He's had enough success against CUSA level talent over the past 2 years that they've played CUSA teams that he can say, hey, I can hack it at this level. And not only that, you bring his offensive coordinator from Houston Baptist and Zach Kittley over. If you're going to make this move, and for those of you listening who may not know, and I'm sure Steve will touch on this as well, He's an air raid quarterback. That is such a unique offense. We're not taking a guy who's an air raid quarterback and saying, hey, go run the triple option, right? We're going to make sure everything is catered to the way you've played football over the past few years, in addition to bring two of his receivers, the Stearns twins, I believe they're twins, over to Western Kentucky as well. So I like a lot about this move, but I'll let Steve jump to the analysis part.
No, I like to. And just to piggyback off what you said, in 4 games last year, he had 15 touchdowns, actually only 1 interception. And what I like about Zappy is if you look at the stats and if you kind of watch some of the film, it's hard to find with HBU film. But if you kind of are able to find, you'll see improvement each year. So each year he's gotten better from 17 to 18 to 19, or from 18 to 19 to 20. And then I would assume he gets better with 2021 as well. And touching on Eric's point, I think two of the games were FCS. Oh no, two or three of the games were CUSA opponents of the 4 games they played last year, and the other opponent was Texas Tech. And so now, granted, none of those teams have high elite level defenses, but those are the defenses he's going to be playing in Conference USA. So I think he'll have success. He's got better players around him. He has the same offensive coordinator coming with him. So yes, it's different. It's a different environment, but it's the same scheme. So he's really only adjusting to the environment. He's not adjusting to the scheme. He'll have new players around him, of course, but it's more those players adjusting to the scheme and adjusting to Zappy than Zappy having to adjust that much to the player. So I think he'll find success in Conference USA. I don't know how they'll look as a team overall, but I would expect, if I'm a Western Kentucky fan, I see a lot more points and we see kind of more exciting offense for sure. And to answer the other part of the question, I think absolutely that's a reason why he transferred, was to get more looks at the NFL level, was to compete with 10 to 11 FBS schools a year, as opposed to that 2 to 3 per year that he gets at the FCS level. So absolutely, I'm sure his goal is to play at the next level. And this, for whatever reason, and probably it was a good reason, seemed like the most logical step to kind of achieve his ultimate goal.
Yeah, and Eric, I want to ask you this, kind of one last thing, on Western Kentucky. So coming off a 5-7 year, I mean, what do you think is a realistic guess for? I mean, do you think they could any shot of like pushing for that division? Or I mean, what do you think they're really trying to accomplish with their 1 year, with Zappy, at the reins?
Well, I'm sure what they're trying to accomplish is, a division title, right? Now,
right.
How close or not close they're going to come to that? Oh man, it's going to get interesting. And here's one of the things, I don't want to go into a 5-minute soliloquy about, the recruiting and transfer portal, but they are one of the schools that has taken the approach, as with the transfer portal that's provided, to where, hey, if you don't want to recruit 20 high school kids, that's fine. We'll just go sign 20 kids who have a year or 2 of college experience, right? It's my version of what I've said is college football free agency. And that's what they did. They only signed a handful of kids in their recruiting class from high school. They signed 17 kids from the transfer portal. That means, just to piggyback off of your point, there's asking, what are they trying to accomplish? They are all in on this 1 year. They are all in on win now.
Yeah.
And I think that is going to be really interesting. But the issue is they lost just as many kids to the portal heading out. Now, not all of those kids were starters or anything of that nature. They lost one of the best young defensive tackles in the G5 ranks, Ricky Barber, to UCF. That did happen. And they also lost a receiver, I want to escape my name right now, who was one of the starters for them early on in the year to the transfer portal. So we're going to see how that mesh of not only the quarterback, not only the new system, but transitioning in a whole new, I almost said the word litany, a whole new group of players into your program. That is going to be interesting to watch. So, I mean, their goal obviously is a division title, but how that'll shape up. You listen, Tyson Helton, if this were, a poker game, he's all in. And we're just going to see how it happens.
All right. So moving things just east of Western Kentucky over to Charlotte, coming off of a 2-4 season. They got Chris Reynolds, who's been proven to be, probably at the very least a decent to good quarterback in this conference, like the 5'11" walk-on. And but they're bringing in James Foster out of Texas A&M, who obviously has, had the huge star power, coming out of high school and kind of has that big upside, potential to him. But again, coming into a room where there's kind of already an established quarterback. What do you guys think about this quarterback room? Do you think there's any real push on Chris? I mean, I know bringing in a good guy to be the number 2 QB always, makes the number 1 guy better, but kind of speaking for James Foster, I mean, I don't think he really kind of came from A&M where he wasn't playing to Charlotte just a, hey, I just won't play here too either. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think, the thought processes was, bringing him in? Steven, you can start that off.
Yeah. I still think Chris Reynolds is the guy and will be the guy moving forward. I know we've talked a little bit, at least in the QB Spotlight podcast about this. And I probably looked too into it and probably thought too much that there'll be a pretty heavy competition. Foster came in. To your point, I do think Foster definitely come in to compete and he wants to play. But I do think Chris Reynolds is the guy moving forward. But at the same time, having a transfer like that is only going to make your quarterback room better. So at the very least, they got better. And of course, Foster wants to play. But I think Chris Reynolds is the guy. And until we see something otherwise or until something kind of crazy breaks, I think I'm confident saying Reynolds is the guy. He's going to be better moving forward because last year he struggled with some injuries. The COVID years is kind of crazy. I expect him to be back to the form he was in 2019. And when I think he was at second team all-conference quarterback, Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, but he had a good season regardless. So,
yeah, no, absolutely, you're correct as far as him being second team. And I'll kind of quickly touch on the quarterback aspect and maybe kind of talk about the team really quick. As far as Reynolds, I think he's going to be the guy. I mean, as you mentioned, scrappy walk-on, worked his way up. Foster has all the physical tools, right? And if for whatever reason Chris Reynolds is still recovering from last year's injury, and it's important to note he did have an injury that plagued him throughout the year after the App State game, then you have the talented backup in Foster right there and can kind of pick things up, and they can maybe kind of move the offense maybe in the direction they wanted to. Just of note, remember, they've brought in transfers for the past 2 years. They brought in Brett Keane 2 years ago to challenge, 2 years ago, and Will Healy's first season to challenge. Reynolds beat him out. And then he was the guy last year, and then they come in and bring another transfer as well. So in my mind, Reynolds is the guy, but it'll be interesting to see kind of how his open of the season really dictates where they go with the quarterback situation.
Reynolds is becoming quite the transfer slayer, if you will. He's not giving up that spot. But interesting stuff. Okay, moving things over to Middle Tennessee State University, MTSU, coming off a 3-6 records. Looks like Bailey Hockman's probably going to be the guy. With O'Hare's going to an FCS school in California, right?
Sacramento State.
Sacramento State. Okay, so he's departed, and Bailey Hockman's has been a bit of a journeyman, coming from Florida State to the community college ranks to North Carolina State, and now at MTSU. That's a lot of stops. So, what do you guys think about this quarterback room? Is there competition? I mean, like, is it just, what's going on there?
Yeah. So first of all, we're big O'Hara fans. We wish him the best at Sacramento State. And, but if you've listened to the QB Spotlight podcast, listen to even Eric talk about the situation, they're just kind of changing offensive scheme and their identity. They're going away from kind of like, for lack of a better term, a Johnny Manziel style football, backyard football, make a play, to more of a pro style type offense, drop back, let it rip kind of deal. And you can argue what offense is better because O'Hara had a lot of success, but the players around him didn't have a ton of success. So you could argue that with Hockman coming in, you'll see more success from those players because it's a bit more traditional. We will remain to see what happens. Hockman has shown some good things, especially at Maryland. He had a few starts there whenever Devin Leary was not the starting quarterback. So I think he's shown some good things, probably a good move for his career. And I would assume he's a starting guy. But at the same time, we've seen guys come in from P5 and not have success at G5 level. But there's nothing to say that he won't have success, but they'll definitely changing their offensive identity. That's kind of my biggest takeaway. We're going to see a different Middle Tennessee State offense. Is not going to be O'Hara making plays left and right, arm, legs, and just turning nothing into something. So definitely going to be an identity shift for Middle Tennessee State.
Steve, I can tell you've been listening to my podcast, and you almost sound like a journalist, sir, with that great insight.
You know what? I'm done.
Really quick, just to kind of emphasize what Steve said there. It is about the shift in offense, right? That's the big thing. Here's a fun fact, Sonoy. If you look at MTSU's run game, they've had great success from the quarterback spot with Asher O'Hara in 2 years. I believe he had almost 1,000 yards, maybe topped 1,000 2 years ago, and then obviously he had success last year as well. They have not had a running back rush for over 587 yards since 2016. That was Itavis Mathers when he had 1,600 yards. But if you look at Shatan Mobley, I want to say it was 2018 year, he had 587 yards. If you take out those years, they've had their leading rushers go for, in 2019, their leading rusher had just a shade under 300 yards rushing. And that's from the running back. Now, again, not the quarterback, from the running back. So that just goes to show you that with Asher, a lot of the offense was run through him. And I think with Bailey Hockman, and Bailey Hockman should be the starter. They have Chase Cunningham and Mike DeLeo who are returning as well. But Bailey Hockman should be the guy. It'll be more of a traditional style. Expect the running backs. They have talented running backs, talented receivers who, again, just because a lot of the offenses run through Asher, maybe those guys kind of took a hit a little bit. So expect that transition to really kind of dictate how Middle Tennessee is going to fare this year.
All righty. All right. Moving things back down to South Florida and FIU. We got, Max Schwarzenegger, whatever his name is. Eric, I'll let you clean that up for me here in a second. But okay, so the kind of question I feel like with FIU is, really coming off an 0-5 year, what are their expectations? And let's say, they get into the thick of the season and they're 2-4 or whatever the case may be. And at that point, could we see, competition or, maybe them bringing in, a Grayson James or a Hayden Carlson, just from the standpoint of why not get these guys reps? I mean, this season, what are we going to do? Are we going to play lights out with, Max Bortenschlager to try to get 1 or 2 more wins, or is it more, or is it more valuable for the program at that point to maybe get some of these younger guys in and just, let them do what they do from if the season is at that point, midway through. But Steven, what are your thoughts? And then we'll go down to Eric and let him get on his.
Yeah. So actually, I'm gonna throw it to Eric first because he'll have so much more insight. Then maybe I can talk about what each guy kind of does well as a quarterback and their differences. But I'll let Eric kind of take it away just because he'll have so much more insight than I will for this right now.
That's nice of you, Steve. I can't have much more insight about a freshman who I haven't seen in person yet. I can have some insight on, first off, you nailed the name.
Thank you.
You nailed the name. You said Schwarzenegger the first time, then happened to nail Bortenschlager. It's actually not that hard once you kind of look at it. Nevertheless, Max Bortenschlager. Okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds here on Max. Maryland transfer, had some success. Played in 2017 against a lot of solid Big Ten schools. Played against UCF. Fought injuries. Offensive coordinator changes. Bounces down to FIU last year. We all know the issues that happened with COVID with the team and just a disjointed season. But he also was coming off an ankle injury. Something that wasn't known about Max is he had a nice thick ankle brace on from the start of the year. He played at Liberty. You saw, I don't necessarily, and this is such a catchphrase, but you saw Power 5 throws. You saw Power 5 talent and times last year. But there were also times in which everything just looked to fall apart, and you can say about the entire team, right? So I think Max, with the benefit of an entire offseason, again, I want to emphasize the ankle injury. When he got to FIU, you can't recover, you can't rehab, you can't train because COVID, everyone's home. You don't get the benefit of getting to learn the system, everyone's home. So I think with a full offseason, this will be a better chance to really kind of recap what you get out of him. Kailyn Wiggins, this is what I've always said about Kailyn, definitely has shown himself as a runner. As a thrower, he still has to progress. Now, a lot of FIU fans are down on him and maybe what his passing ability is. It's worth knowing the kid's only throwing 57 passes at the collegiate level. With that being said, with those 57 passes, he has shown enough to show that he needs to progress. You need to see more progression from him as a passer. But I don't think you can just rule him out yet, seeing he's only throwing a game and a half's worth of passes, right? So we'll be interested to see what happens with Kailyn. And then the wild cards are Grayson James, as you mentioned, the kid from Duncanville down there in your guys' neck of the woods. I will let you guys, opine on Texas quarterbacks. And I say that, half sarcastic but half serious in terms of, can someone who's played at that level, and you guys know that landscape of Duncanville and, the competition they're playing against, does that mean he can step right in and play immediately? I'm not willing to write the kid off because I am not that well versed in Texas high school football to know, that level of competition may very well be comparable to CUSA at some points. Yeah. Hayden Carlson is the other kid, the redshirt freshman, son of Jeff Carlson, former NFL quarterback. And the big thing with him is going to be consistency. Butch Davis came out and said prior to signing day, if memory serves me correct, that had FIU's season continued, Hayden Carlson would have started a game or two. So clearly he was progressing that much to where they liked him in comparison with what they were getting out of Max and Kailyn, right? But he also missed some time in the spring due to COVID, and that kind of hurt him as far as his chance to really push and really kind of be in the mix as far as the starting job heading into fall. He'll be in the competition, but it's really going to depend on how things shake out. And Butch Davis has been adamant. I've been a part of a quarterback competition already with James Morgan and Christian Alexander with Butch Davis. And while James more or less was the guy coming in, Butch is going to say, hey, with about 10 to 14 days left in fall, I'm going to start prepping for week 1. And that's when I got to kind of have my guy. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, no, the only thing I really touch on what Eric says is I think you don't want a competition of 3 or 4 guys whenever your week 1 is coming up, right? So just like Eric just said, solidifying more of, okay, who are my top 2 guys? Probably Max Bortenschlager, like Eric said. And I do agree with Eric. He had some pretty big throws whenever he's been healthy. Even some plays at Maryland. Now, it's a short or not a lot to digest, but he's shown the potential to push the ball downfield. So if he's healthy and he can do that, that's all FIU needs starting off. So it could be where he starts off and he kind of rides the ship and then someone eventually takes over down the road. But I think the biggest thing is we don't want 3 or 4 guys in the mix again, kind of like we had last. You don't want that kind of shuffling of quarterbacks like you kind of had last year. So I think you always want 1 guy, but I think 2 would be at the maximum number you would want to have kind of going, shuffling through that starting position. So I think obviously we'll see what happens with FIU quarterback room. It's not going to be worse than last year. I think it's safe to say that. But they have some talented guys. It's been fun to kind of you poke jokes to play, but they have some talented guys. I like Hayden Carlson. Huge fan of James for a simple fact he's a Texas kid, but he did play solid competition. And if it was a different year and there was more recruiting was normal, I think he's a Power 5 guy hands down. Super high on him. You can say I'm Texas biased, but I truly think he's extremely polished and he's ready to step in if he's able to, or if they call on his number to do that. So obviously we'll see what happens, but I do think we'll see much improved play at the quarterback position at the very least.
Very interesting stuff. Well, that pretty much wraps up our take on the Conference USA East Division. We'll break down the West Division at a soon to be announced date. And guys, we're not far off from the start of the season. That's exciting stuff. I know I'm excited. I'm assuming you guys are as well, but won't be too much longer. We'll actually have some actual football to talk about.
That's right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Really quick, I just want to end the podcast on this note right here. As for those of you watching, you'll see the 2 gentlemen at the top of the screen. They're showing their wedding rings because they are, they want to get on me as far as my vocabulary and the verified on Twitter, but yet I am the one who I'm the single one here. I wasn't lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to have the good looks as these 2 guys to be able to acquire wives. So I just want to point that out. For all the crap they gave me in the beginning of the podcast, I would throw it back real quick at the end.
Eric is a catch. For all single ladies out there. He's a catch.
Yeah, stop it, Eric. If you come down here to the Lone Star State, I got a long list of suitable bachelorettes that would love to have their arm around a checkmarked man like yourself.
I'll let you close the show down on that one.
All right, guys. Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming on, Stephen and Eric. And guys, you already know the drill. Once again, like, subscribe. If you have anything to say, let us know in the comments below. And guys, we'll talk again soon.
All right.